point to, but let's just say we lived in a perfect world where whatever we did turned out with maximum benefits. Where do unintended consequences come from?
I don't know about the unintended consequences, but I don't see how it's a bad thing.
Okay, we have one vote for not a bad thing. How many of you think it's a good thing? Don't you want to be better?
I don't trust it.
No, but let's say we lived in a perfect world.
I wouldn't. There's another side to stem cell research. Instead of regrowing the organs through medical technology, we have artificial parts. Like, for example, heart valve. They have a medical piece of equipment, if you will, that functions as a heart valve rather than growing it.
Yeah, and we can put pig valves in. Pigs are very close to us in DNA, and I'll get to the pig in about 5 minutes. Well, look, let me not keep you in suspense any longer. Go ahead.
I think the answer to what you were asking is nature will take its course.
Nature owes us nothing, people. See, we've been on this roll lately that we can control nature. We'll get to this in environmental ethics, like we can stop global warming. After we're done with that myth, try stopping global cooling. We've been through 7 interglacial periods in the last 800,000 years. We're good. I question how good we are. Our ego is a little bit larger, I think, than our capacity right now. But the wild card is nature. Nature owes us nothing. We could do the best thing, and then nature comes along, and nature does what nature does. How many of you know nature messes up? Now, in a way, my Joey is a mess up from nature. Born with congenital cataracts, born with dual hernias, born with his feet in his mother's birth canal, so he has clap feet. He also has something called ataxia. Joey came out of the oven really in need of a little assistance. Now, maybe embryonic stem cell research could have cleared that up, but the simple fact is nature didn't. And just because we make a change to nature does not mean that nature is obliged to follow our blueprint, the new blueprint for life. So but we'll develop that. I don't want to discourage you, because this really does have a lot of upside to it. It's just when you measure it against the downside, this goes back to the utilitarian principle of happiness. How do you measure the upside versus the downside and decide it's worth going forward with? Ramon.
I'm going to quote Jeff Goldblum from Jurassic Park. But yes, nature always finds a way to crash through. Sometimes it Earth destroys, does whatever it needs to, but it will move forward, regardless of what man's ultimate goal.
Could even improve on our changes too, you never know.
And I'll make the point, you say 22 years ago, they said, 5 years stem cell research, and here we are 22 years later.
22 years later, yeah, and we're still trying. And look, I mean, I don't want to be totally discouraging, but I want to be realistic without the politics of it, people. And I'll get to the politics on on Wednesday. So let's do this. This speaks to Carl's concern. This is one possibility. And again, there's an upside and a downside to all of this.
You are their creator. You giveth them life and spirit.
Genetic engineering is the process of cutting and altering genes in an organism's DNA and transferring them in order to bring out favorable changes. The purpose of this science is to make an organism perform certain functions that it usually cannot perform. Genetic engineering has been around for thousands of years and originally was used by farmers who domesticated plants such as corn, wheat, and rice, and selectively bred animals such as the mule. In 1627, Francis Bacon predicted the future of genetic engineering in his book, New Atlantis. Centuries later, Gregor Mendel studied pea plant breeding and published his findings, which led the way for the modern study of genetics. Today, the entire Human Genome Project is known, and gene therapies have been successfully completed. The genetic engineering field now includes genetic selection, gene therapy, stem cells, and cloning.
We're only beginning to understand the information
The first documented case of gene therapy occurred in 1990 on a young girl named Ashanti. Ashanti had a very rare disease known as severe combined immune deficiency that left her with no immune system or way to fight infection. In order to have a chance of survival with the disease, the girl would have to live in a type of bubble that would completely deprive her of human interaction, including with her family. Instead, she was given somatic gene therapy and was able to enroll herself in school and even get vaccinations for diseases. Somatic engineering is the process of targeting genes in specific organs and tissues of the body without affecting genes in the sperm or egg. Somatic engineering can be used to correct genes with defects that cause lifelong and deadly diseases, such as cystic fibrosis. There is no cure for these diseases because they are embedded in a person's genome, and there are no medicines available today that can alter the genetic information. The only plausible way to eradicate these deadly diseases would be to use genetic engineering. Genetic engineering can also alter the sex of an embryo, which would allow a couple to determine the gender of their child. This could be beneficial to couples that know that they definitely want a son or a daughter.
Most babies are accidents. Not me. I was engineered. Born to save my sister's life.
You don't want to saddle children with false expectations. The parents pick a kid to be smart, the kid doesn't succeed, now they're mad because they spent a lot of money to do this, they don't get what they want. We need more oversight of this industry, and I think this is going to turn out to be one of the biggest issues in the next 10, 15 years.
Genetic alteration could lead to an impression that people are products meant to be designed, perfected, and controlled. Parents would choose to design their child to be talented or more skilled in a particular area, like intelligence, instead of accepting them for who they are. This could lead to a deterioration in the quality of parenting if the child isn't interested in or doesn't succeed in the parent's intended goal.
Will need to reflect the physical and mental characteristics of every unborn child.
The belief is that if people do become genetically engineered, anything they accomplish is due to their alteration, not their hard work or talent. The abilities and skills are no longer their own, but rather a product of science.
Imperfection built in already. Your child isn't needing additional burdens. And keep in mind, this child is still you. Simply the best of you.
Who's to say what's the better trait? Is it better to be redheaded than it is to be brown-haired? Is it better to have freckles or not? Those sorts of things I think are very subjective and in some ways driven by our culture.
If everyone was engineered, the human race would become more and more uniform. During World War II, Hitler attempted to remove certain traits from the gene pool to create what he thought would be a supreme race. Most would agree that this was unethical, but would gene selection through science make it suddenly acceptable? Who is to say which traits are desirable and which traits are bad? Would parents try to cure things such as short stature by gene selection?
This is the disaster everyone warns about. A new species set loose in the world.
We've documented the entire human genome, but that doesn't mean we know everything about it. Some genes are responsible for multiple traits. What if you select a gene without knowing the consequences? In mice, for example, it's possible to increase memory by altering a gene that also makes them more sensitive to pain. It's difficult to tell what all the side effects are without having done extensive research that can take decades and cost millions.
This here is sizable. $120 billion to be exact. And I can't afford for them to reconsider.
What you tell them is your business, Doctor.
Cost to consumers would also play a factor in the ethics of genetic engineering. Since these treatments are expensive, only the wealthy would be able to afford them. The rich could afford to make their children more intelligent or more athletic, while the poor are left with whatever nature gives them. This would cause socioeconomic differences that would lead to separate genetic classes. Clearly, there are many factors to consider before genetic engineering becomes a commercialized process. If certain people are allowed to get gene therapy, what would the criteria be? Would it be okay for parents to select traits? Would insurance cover treatments if they are necessary for a normal life, like in Ashanti's case? Whatever we decide, scientists are already working on a future that may include genetically enhancing the human body in every way possible. In a study done in 2004, scientists were able to change the diet of a select group of soldiers to provide them with a modified version of carotene, a protein that allows you to see. Simply changing what they ate gave these soldiers infrared vision temporarily. It's very possible to change the genetics in the eye to match these results so that people can see infrared, even with a normal diet. Researchers are also working on figuring out what genes make a hawk's eye so powerful. One day, this gene could be transferred into humans, along with other enhancements. One of the most controversial areas of study pertain to the length of human life. It's been shown that it's possible to increase the life of mice by 10 to 15% just by modifying certain genes. Because mice and human genomes are very similar, it may be possible to increase the life of humans as well. In a world where overpopulation and lack of resources is already becoming a real problem, do we really need people to live longer? However, the future of genetic engineering isn't all bleak. It's possible that we will be able to cure disorders caused by genetic mutations. Scientists believe they can induce a genetic change in cells where the extra 21st chromosome that causes Down syndrome is slowly removed from all of the cells in the body. It may be even possible to cure Alzheimer's and other memory degradation disorders. Genetically engineering humans could help eradicate many genetic diseases which would otherwise have no cure. However, if handled incorrectly, genetic engineering could cause discrimination, super diseases, and possibly new species of humans. Genetic engineering is going to be a huge issue in the next 10 to 15 years, and it's up to us to decide what is ethically right and know where to draw the line.
So they just introduced a new variable to the discussion that's called gene therapy. There's a tool out there, it's made up of what's called RNA, and it's called CRISPR-Cas9. And it's like a splicer, and they can go into genes and chromosomes, and they can splice out what they don't want. The Chinese, they think, have done this when it comes to HIV, that there's a weakness in the chromosome that allows HIV to get in, and they've cut out what they think is the weakness, they put in what they think would be right, and they didn't implant any of them because none of the eggs they did this with were viable to go in. If that could work, that's part of the hope that we're talking about. You could get rid of inherited diseases, inherited defects within the human body. Maybe. And we've become very good with this tool. It's called CRISPR-Cas9, I think. We've become very good at it. In fact, the Chinese have become very good at it. The Chinese have become so good at it that they now have a cloning factory. That's a little picture, but that is one big factory. It's located in Beijing. The Chinese scientist behind the world's biggest cloning factory is technology advanced enough to replicate people, they think. He said he's only holding off for fear of public reaction. The group and his partners are building a giant plant in the northern Chinese part of Xinjiang, where it is to go into production within the next 7 months. This, by the way, was written in 2018 of October. And aims for the output of 1 million clone cows a year by 2020. Cattle are the only beginning. In the factory pipeline are also thoroughbred racehorses, as well as pet and police dogs specialized in searching and sniffing. So it's already on the move, people. And other countries don't have the restrictions that we have. I'll get to the law on Wednesday where you cannot use federal funding to do any of this. However, there's no law against doing any of it. So if you have private funding, there's no regulatory process, and we might have this going on as far as we know. What we do know is some countries, China is probably the most advanced that we're aware of, that is doing not only therapeutic cloning, but reproductive cloning,